Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would answer, a question that comes up often when people say, but Jason, I thought, excess carbs are stored as body fat, and that's just simply not supported by the evidence. Okay, that isn't supported by the evidence. I mean, we could get over to the fact that obviously it's completely inefficient, that the process itself uses a significant amount of calories when it does happen because it's not an easy conversion. And we could point all that out and we could use some common sense, but instead of the common sense of saying, hey, it should make a lot of sense to people that fat is obviously stored as fat much, much easier than carbohydrates are. But when we start looking at the data and the research, it kind of shows that it almost doesn't occur to the degree that anyone thinks it does, let alone inefficient. So the common sense thing we can throw out the window because the data shows it's even more extreme. And we've known this for a long time. Again, there were studies done as early as the 1990s when they did carb overfeeding and were able to measure it with the less sophisticated equipment. Some of the researchers were finding that, look, only about 5 grams of carbs a day in our research is appearing to turn into fat. Okay? More modern data has gotten a lot more intricate. Okay, it's gotten a lot more intricate. So what do I mean by that? Well, they've gotten into carbon isotope testing when they're feeding people, and here's what they're finding as far as the distribution of body fat gain from what you eat. Protein doesn't seem to cause any body fat gain. It's just such an inefficient pathway. Even though the pathways technically exist, they're so difficult and so inefficient that no measurable amount of it has ever actually occurred in the lab. So it's just a hypothetical. It seems to be like zero. None of the protein you eat stores as body fat. All right. Only about 1% of the carbohydrates that we eat ever get stored as body fat on average, and 99% of our fat in our body comes from dietary fat. Okay, so only about 1% of the fat in your entire body seems to have come from carbohydrates that we eat, just as a general rule. Okay, so it just doesn't occur at a large rate, and when it does occur, it is not subcutaneous fat. So that's what people are like, but there's this study, they showed this significant amount of de novo lipogenesis, and notice that usually occurs in lean individuals. Okay, so that's more of a concern for people who are very lean. So your body appears to be able to do so more efficiently the lower your body fat because, well, your body's trying to do what it can to add a little bit of reserves. So in lean people, it is quite a bit higher. But it seems to be almost exclusively internal, meaning it's not under your skin. It's the organ fat, liver fats, things like that. Okay, and also a lot of that de novo lipogenesis that's occurring when dietary fat is extremely low is there to create cholesterol so that we can make hormones out of it. People will point that out all the time. They'll go, well, without dietary cholesterol and fat, we can't make all these hormones. Well, yeah, we can. So when they get low enough, that is a part of the de novo lipogenesis that you're seeing is your body converting some glucose into lipids so that it can make hormones. So a lot of it's being used to make your testosterone and your estrogen and your thyroid hormones and all of that. It's not necessarily going to fat stores. Okay. So what happens? What happens to the excess carbs? Well, we burn it off through a few different pathways. Your body doesn't seem to want to store carbohydrates as fat. It will store any excess fat you eat. And this is why I tell people if you drop fat really, really, really low on a lean bulk, you gain almost no fat, even if you eat enormous amounts of carbohydrates. Because your body doesn't store the extra carbs. It will store the amount of fat you eat when you carb overfeed. Now, I'm not saying that's no possible fat gain, because if you're eating enough fat to gain, a couple ounces of body fat every week, then you're going to gain a couple of ounces of body fat every week if you're in a calorie surplus. But it will be much lower than if your whole surplus is coming from dietary fat. Plus, keep in mind, how do we define surplus? Well, the surplus itself is very small in that case. Why? Because our energy out goes way up as carbohydrate intake goes up, a few things happen. Number one, it ramps up thermic effect of it through the mitochondria in your muscle cells. So that produces just heat just to get rid of the excess. All right, that's after glycogen stores are full. Okay, it will burn it off as heat. It will increase thyroid output, so metabolic rate goes up. It will improve ratios of T4 to T3 conversion, so your thyroid cranks up. Again, metabolic rate goes up. And then lastly, it will increase NEAT. And again, the NEAT, though, people say, well, what about someone who's insulin resistant? Well, don't be insulin resistant. Lose body fat. Do whatever you need to get your insulin resistance under control. And that's a whole separate topic. I mean, we could discuss that. You don't necessarily have to go low carb to do that. That is one option. It's not a requirement. You can do it on high carbs. But there's a lot of work to reversing insulin resistance. But yeah, if you're insulin resistant, the NEAT may not go up as much because you're going to be lethargic. That's why insulin resistance causes body fat gain, not because of the insulin itself. It's because your blood sugar is spiky. It tends to make you lethargic, and it makes you hungry. So you eat more and you move less. And so then you also eat more fat. Okay. But for people who are not insulin resistant, as carbohydrate intake goes up, we have more energy. We move more. We fidget more. That can be hundreds and hundreds of extra calories burned. In some extreme cases, maybe 800 or 1,000, but that's extreme. That is very extreme. That's not necessarily normal. 300, 400, 500 extra calories burned just through NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's just moving around more, fidgeting, moving, being bouncy, right? That burns energy. That burns energy. So your energy output starts going up. So it doesn't even change calories in, calories out. So people will say, well, if you ascribe to a calorie in, calorie out model, it doesn't make sense because you can't just add all these hundreds of calories. I'm like, well, yes, you can if those hundreds of carb calories result in more energy out due to metabolic rate, thermic effect, NEAT, and you end up burning 800 more calories every day because of it, then it works perfectly well with calories in, calories out. Keep in mind, anything not stored is going out through calories out. All right? And then we even get into the case of at a certain point with GI tract, we start expelling undigested calories at a certain point. And that number is lower than a lot of people realize. And this is stuff that we have to know for endurance athletes. This is actually it's important to know what your gut can absorb in a day, right? So there's a certain point where, yes, people can literally overfeed enormous amounts of carbohydrates with minimal body fat gain. It's absolutely possible both in the lab and it's been observed in the real world. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.